Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Daniel Wittenberg.
So it seems like we have quite a few scaling presentations this year, so it's good we're all getting to share some good info. This was a presentation we kind of started last year, and some things have changed. Some things are still in flux because it's quite a big network, so it's like the Titanic. Trying to make changes doesn't happen very fast. Little background, I guess I've been doing Linux and Unix for many, many years and all sorts of different other technologies, so it's doing the monitoring kind of fit right in because I got to understand a little bit of the different technologies. I guess some of the topics we'll go over just kind of cover the whole range of things that we looked at when going through all of our performance and issues and problems that we've had over the years. And this is slightly outdated, but pretty close to what the architecture looks like. The big difference between what's here and what was last year is there's actually 15 servers now. We actually ended up adding some more physical hosts for some more capacity and oncoming new services and stuff like that. So it was easier at this point just to throw some more stuff on there. One other slight thing I guess we did change with this too is we ended up having to take some of the Splunk stuff off, so not every server runs Splunk now, mainly because each server was generating over 25 gigs of log data a day, and they complained about the cost of the Splunk license for that. So we kind of went down to just a couple servers in each data center as kind of samples. So we still end up doing a lot of log parsing if we want to go back and see if something happened somewhere. This was a sample of one of our setups of CheckMK. With about 1.5 million service checks. It fluctuates quite a bit as servers come on and off and services get added and removed and changed, but this was one of the bigger days that I saw when they were making a bunch of changes and still having a lot of problems, it looks like, that day. So this was off our main server, so it oversees all the Nagios servers, all 48 of them, from one interface. Yeah, this was a little bit older one too, because we're running 1.2.0 of multi-site now. Hardware versus VMware. We ran into some problems early on. When we started the implementation, it was originally scaled out before I was brought on, and it was tried to use several VMware servers. And when we started doing some scaling testing early on, we realized that it was not going to work. I've got some numbers coming up that will kind of show some of the differences. But after working actually with some of the VMware engineers, what we came back with was the high rate of forking checks. The checks and the NRPE and everything that was being forked was a lot faster rate than what VMware could handle. So we found that even a 10-year-old server physical box could outrun a 8-core VM. Kind of sad, but it wasn't good. So one of the things that I put in red here was something that changed, and we kind of started playing with live check a bit from live status to see if we could just kind of easily mitigate some of that forking rate. We ran into some serious problems with it, locking up and not working right, so it never made it past QA testing and on a small scale. So we kind of ripped it out and said, all right, we're going to live with it for now. We're hoping 4.0 will fix that. So that's kind of the plan at this point, is start stress testing 4 and see if we can go with VMware again. Because one of the big things we liked about the VMware is it keeps the HA and failover stuff much, much simpler. We don't have to have very complicated setups for failover, and when it doesn't fail over, shared resources. Can turn on some of the in-memory copies and stuff, so if one server goes down, you see a minor hiccup and the other server's up and running, and keeps the OS and config and storage and all that stuff much, much simpler. That's kind of been one of our requirements from the beginning, is keep it very simple. We don't like hacking around a lot of stuff if we have to. The CPU requirements, yeah, when we did our testing, we found that even lots of little CPUs performed a lot better than smaller amount of big CPUs. So we're hoping that that'll probably carry over with 4.0.2 with the worker processes. Memory. Even with Nagios 3, we found that the memory utilization was really good. Most of the servers only have 4 gigs of RAM, and it still operates pretty efficiently. I think we're up to a 256 meg RAM disk, and it still has plenty to run. I think that RAM disk is probably a little bigger than most people that I've worked with, but the other big thing I've seen affect that is the plugins. We've had some people write some really bad plugins that would very quickly eat up available memory. So that's one thing that I do tell people is when you're writing checks, make sure you write them really well. Since most people don't use C, which will run a lot less memory, but most people I know are writing them in either like Python, Perl, or Ruby. So it's just making sure that your algorithms are good. Disk I/O. This was a big one that I think a lot of people have noticed, and why a lot of people use the RAM disk. With 4.0, I don't think this is going to be an issue at all. Almost all the disk I/O is gone. So there was some talk about even taking out there's a default in the RPMs that we put in that will make it real easy to turn on the RAM disk. You can just specify it in etc sysconfig Nagios, say use RAM disk, and it turns it on automatically. We thought about ripping it out, but left it in for now because there still could be some people using the check results and stuff like that. So we've left it in for now, but it's probably gonna go away. But that'll be a great improvement with 4.0. Here were some of the performance numbers that we ran through. We had a couple physical boxes, one brand new one and one really old one that we did. And you can see some of the numbers of 800 and 1,000 hosts and some of our service latency checks. They were getting pretty high. So even our latencies were getting really low on the 8-year-old boxes as compared to ESX. And we were really surprised that we could only get about 1,000 hosts before it really even got that bad. The R710, this one went really well. We couldn't find enough stuff to throw at it to make it hardly even work. And so we tried to configure it about the same as under ESX. It was actually going to be an ESX server at some point, but it just came off a truck, so we got to play with it. So one of the things that has changed in the last year is we're actually still in the middle of migrating to Red Hat 6.3. There's a lot of infrastructure stuff that has to change to support that, so it's taken us a while to get there. So I think about half of the environment right now is upgraded to 6.3. And so far we haven't seen a big change from that. I think the performance is a little bit better. And we definitely have some better monitoring tools. So it does help when we're starting to look at stuff. So one of the recommendations I always make to people is to definitely look at what services you're running. I know a lot of people tend not to pay attention to how they build servers. But at least the bigger environments, a lot of times you'll end up with a group of people that build OSs, and then you layer your app on it. And that's kind of what we started with, and started questioning why all these services were running that may or may not actually be used for anything. So I think stripping down any running services to save on, well, disk I/O, which, like I said, don't think there'll be much of an issue anymore, but memory, CPU, all that stuff, anything that could potentially cause problems. Like I said, goes back to the keep it simple. Strip it down if you don't need it, get rid of it. Creating the RAM disk in the RC script, yeah, this was something that was put in the new RC scripts that you'll find out in the new builds, and turned on in 4.0. Well, it's not turned on in 4.0, but it's in there in the 4.0 RPMs. This was roughly the code that we used. I don't know that that's actually what made it into for the actual RC scripts because we variabilized a little bit more.